right, the next question tonight. Who or what is Baal? And to be honest, I don't remember who asked this one because I got this one in at the very beginning of the study, and it sat there on the list and I never answered it. And then I was going back through the questions today and I said, oh, there's one I haven't answered. So I'm not sure who asked this one. I hope you're here tonight if it was you. But who or what is Baal? Now, let's, you may have some memory, some background, Old Testament background of Baal. I think it appears one time in the New Testament, but it's kind of an Old Testament allusion back to the Old Testament. So what are the common things that we know about Baal? What can you tell me?
God of fertility and crops and all like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary. Where did you get that from?
I thought I got it out the Bible.
Just remembered it off the top of your head?
Very good.
Here, I've got a handout for you. I'll start some this direction and this direction too. This is just a short article on Baal from the Holman Bible Dictionary.
I don't like that. Oh,
So they should be coming around. You can get you a copy of it. And Betty is right. Baal is a god of the storm and of fertility, which means that your flocks and herds are reproducing well, that your crops are reproducing well, and yes, that even your wife is producing well. So this is Baal, and he was a Canaanite god, little g there. He was one of the gods that was worshipped there in the Promised Land area that the Israelites were moving into. And he is one of the great temptations that Israel faced, not to worship other gods. Baal being probably foremost among those, is probably the most common idol or most common false god that we read about in the Old Testament. So you see there in your article, he's the Lord of the Canaanite religion, so that probably means he's the most powerful or the highest, most important god in their religion. Seen in the thunderstorms, which there's a lot of power in thunderstorms. You know, I like going out and watching thunderstorms and hearing the thunder, watching the lightning, those kind of things. Just remind you of God's power.
From the roof of his church, even.
Yeah, I did climb on the roof of the church one day when it was thundering and lightning outside.
That's good for you.
I'm glad that you raised them, I'm sure.
Yeah, the ceiling was about to collapse in the foyer there because one of the roof drains wasn't unclogged. So somebody needed to get up and unclog it quickly. So we just hoped that no lightning struck at the right moment. But yeah, being up on the roof in a thunderstorm standing in 6 inches of water is not the place you normally want to be. Because we know thunderstorms are pretty powerful. So, if they were going to make up a god, if they were going to worship this god of fertility, he's their highest god, how is he going to show his power? He's showing it in a thunderstorm. That's the way it works out. You see, he was a great temptation for Israel a number of different times throughout First Samuel, through Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. You'll see the Israelites at various times turning and worshiping Baal. The Hebrew word is actually 2 syllables. If you were going to say it in Hebrew, it would be Baal. You hear that 2 syllables, first syllable ba and second syllable al. But it sounds kind of ridiculous to say it that way in English, so we'll just say Baal. We'll just stick with that. You see the actual word Baal means Lord, owner, possessor, or husband, proper noun referring to the supreme god of the Canaanites. So, when we put this together, even just in our last question, we talked about Elijah going up against the prophets of Baal, right? He was the god that they were worshiping, that they thought was going to bring fire down on their altar. Here's what we know about Baal. We said Canaanite god, storms and fertility. Mostly in 1 Samuel, 2 Chronicles, and 1 Samuel through 2 Chronicles, that group of scripture. And also Jeremiah, we see it show up a number of times. There's a few other places that it does show up. Sometimes it's in place names. A name will actually be named Baal something And I think your article talks a little bit about that as well. And there are some people named Baal as well. So we said the word means Lord. Now he had a wife or a female goddess that he spent his time with. Ashtoreth, Asherah poles in the Old Testament are in honor or in worship of her. You can imagine that a god of fertility would have a wife or a woman, which also means that one of the ways that you would worship is through sexual immorality, by doing the things that people do to be fertile, which is one of the problems in Baal worship. It's that not only are they worshiping a false god, but this false god worship, this idol worship, is pulling them into all kinds of immorality and things against what God has commanded them to. Why is Baal worship so appealing? Well, if you're a farmer and you've had a couple dry years of crops and your family's about to starve, you're saying, well, what can I do to get some rain to come? What can I do to get my crops to grow? Maybe I've been trying to be faithful to Yahweh and everything, and it's just not working. And my neighbor over there, he says I just need to worship Baal. So I'm going to try to worship Baal and see if that can get me some better results. Now we know that that's being biblically unfaithful, but you can imagine how some people might have thought along those lines. There was not only that temptation, but then there was the temptation of, similar to what you see in the New Testament, where the Corinthians are dealing with temple prostitution and temptations like that. The same kinds of things here. Is that there's sexual immorality and pleasure that's promised if you go and worship Baal in this particular way, and it was a temptation that some people fell into. So, a lot of problems with Baal, and he becomes just one of the most prototypical false gods or idols in the Old Testament, and that's for the most part who Baal is. He's a number of different stories with him, and he shows up again and again.
I always wondered what the astropoles, what do you read them at the...
Asherah poles?
Yeah, they would go up in the hills and destroy them.
Right.
And
when they were trying to purify and get rid of the Baal worship.
I was wondering what they were.
Yeah, it's probably something along the lines of what you would think of as a totem pole.
Uh-huh.
Just a carved wooden pole is what they think it most likely was.
And they would get rid of them, and then little by little they would all bring them back.
Yeah.
They would come back into when they would intermarry.
Yeah, you go through the different kings of Israel, and some of the kings, Hezekiah, Josiah, do great jobs of purging Israel of Baal worship in the high places and the altars where these kinds of things were happening, the Asherah poles, and turning Israel back to Yahweh. But then you have other evil kings that promote the worship of Baal and other false gods and things like
Did
that.
Did they have a picture of the god on these totem pole, whatever they call it?
Yeah, probably so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pictures of that and all kinds of other things too. Lots of pagan religions that dealt in the area of fertility had pictures of things that we would consider appropriate for children.
Oh, okay.
Not uncommon. I mean, that's what they're worshiping. That's what they're celebrating. So that's what they picture on their carvings and artwork.
Japan.
Totem pole for
Yeah, basically, yeah.
We went to a fertility festival in Japan when we were over there. Sure, going pregnancy didn't matter, but yeah, there was a lot of, like I said, not appropriate for children.
Yeah, I thought the article was pretty cool that it had a picture of that statue that dated 15th to 14th century BC. It's a really old artifact that they have there. And I mean, that's an Old Testament idol. That's a graven image that God's people were not supposed to have. But the God's little G of the nations, they had idols and false gods of all different kinds.